Good afternoon. My name is Donna Marie Collins. I'm the hearing examiner that will be presiding over this afternoon's zoning application. The case name is Jbra, Commercial Plan Development. It is an attempt to rezone 0.6 acres of property in the San Carlos Island Planning District. All testimony and evidence that I accept during these hearings must be taken in under oath, so at the conclusion of my remarks, I will administer the oath to everyone in the room. If you intend to speak on the record, I ask that you raise your right hand at that time and take the oath. For those of you who are not familiar with these proceedings, generally what happens is the representatives of the property owner will present the case. Their testimony and presentation may include more than one witness. They usually have a PowerPoint presentation. They'll go through all the review criteria in the Land Development Code and evaluate the application for consistency with the lead plan. Following their presentation, the county planner that reviewed the application and prepared the staff report will also make a presentation. They will hit on the high points of the application, being careful not to repeat the entire presentation, and they will focus on the conditions that are recommended to ameliorate any off-site impacts for the project. At the conclusion of county staff's presentation, I will open up the floor to members of the public. At that time, it's appropriate for you to come to the podium, state your name. If you wish, you can show us where you live in relationship to the property, and then say what you have to say. My experience in these hearings is that members of the public are not uniformly against or in favor of most applications, but they have some very specific concerns. If you share those concerns with us, you allow us an opportunity to further clarify the issue for you or craft a condition to address those concerns. All right, let's take the oath. Please raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm the testimony and evidence you place on the record will be the truth?
I do.
Okay, thank you. I'm ready to begin.
Good afternoon, Madam Hearing Examiner. For the record, my name is Megan Strayhorn. I'm an attorney with Strayhorn Persons, Millica & Fisher here on behalf of the applicant and property owner. Before we begin, I can turn to the next slide. We are here on case DCI2024-00023. And before we get into the content of the presentation, I would like to introduce our team. We have the property owner is present. We have myself as the attorney. We have a certified planner, Patty Kulak, a civil engineer, Stephanie Caldwell, and transportation, we have Yuri Baikow. At this time, although Mr. Baikow and Ms. Caldwell have been previously deemed experts in this forum, I would like to proffer Patty Kulak as an expert for certified planning.
Okay, has she made any presentations in this forum before?
Yes, she has, and I do have a copy of her resume,
Okay.
as well as she has been deemed experts in surrounding jurisdictions such as Naples and...
Did you testify before me, or was it before Amanda?
Neither with Lee County. Yeah, I'll come on up.
Oh, so she has not. She has
not
not.
in this
Okay.
jurisdiction.
Not in this jurisdiction.
All right.
Patty Kulak for the record.
Okay, how about give me a summary of your background and experience, particularly in Lee County with the Lead Plan and Land Development Code?
Understood. I have just about 5 applications currently in with Lee County right now, all of which are being compared against both the Land Development Code and the Lee Plan. I also have substantial history with the City of Naples and Collier County, so 10 years of government work on the staff side, and I also am the city planner for the City of LaBelle. So large planning history, but a lot of current work here in Lee County.
Okay, thank you. Is she going to be making the presentation first?
Yes.
Or- Okay.
And also at this time, we have some additional exhibits that we would like to enter into the evidence. And for the record, this includes the 48-hour letter, letters of no objection, the updated master concept plan, updated deviation list, the PowerPoint presentation, and a large copies of the master concept plan for your reference, Madam Hearing Examiner.
Okay, thank you. Just give me a moment to get this marked. The 48-hour letter is already Exhibit A, so let's skip. Exhibit 1 will be letters, composite of letters of no objection.
Yes, ma'am.
Exhibit 2 is the updated master concept plan. And when is this dated? What's the date on it? Is there a date on it?
There is the 21st, April 21st.
And where is that?
The title block.
I see April 2025. I don't see the 21st marked anywhere.
It was sealed at the.
Oh, I see,
upper
plot
right-hand
date.
corner.
Okay. Let me just mark that for my assistant. Okay, exhibit 2 copies of the master concept plan.
For the record, one of those is the alternate plan and one is the primary. Those will be
Yes.
referenced throughout the presentation.
The alternate master concept plan is exhibit 3. Then we have the PowerPoint. Applicant exhibit 4. And then finally, the last one is an enlarged master concept plan.
Yes, for note.
Both options.
Yes. Yes, ma'am.
All right. All right, you may begin.
Thank you. And to begin, this request does include 3 individual parcels located on San Carlos Boulevard, Main Street, and South Street. The request is to rezone the roughly 0.6 acre subject property from, we have 1 lot, which is TFC2, or two lots, which are TFC2, and a commercial C1 lot, which is on Main Street, to a commercial plan development. And this commercial plan development would include the 2,840 square foot package store, as well as the commercial parking lots located on South Street. That is an overview of what our request is, and I will turn it over to our certified planner, Ms. Kulak, to provide additional details.
Good afternoon, Madam Hearing Examiner Patty Kulak for the record. Walking through this petition now, we have our property overview. The site, as we've mentioned, is 0.6 acres in size. It does compile 3 different parcels, 2 of which along South Street are residentially zoned lots, and the one along San Carlos Boulevard is a commercial lot that will be reutilized for commercial. This overall site is within the urban planning future land use, and it is within the San Carlos planning area. Looking at just the future land use, again, our parcels are outlined in red. In red for you there. We are within that community, the urban community future land use. We are not requesting a change to that. And this image just shows the differential of all of the surrounding properties, and that there's a vast majority of different zoned future land use elements. Our surrounding zoning, the property to the north is a commercial zoned property, which is C1. That is a bar or cocktail lounge, which will be discussed in our deviation request. And then a little bit further north from that is another CPD, which is a hotel. To the east of our site, we have a mobile home park, and that we previously was a mobile home park and now continues as such. That one will be requesting a separation from. Down at the south of the property, we have land that is owned by Lee County ourselves. It is for a sewer lift station, and across from Main Street, we have a commercially zoned parking lot, also owned by Lee County, that has 61 parking spaces. To the west of our site, from South Street, we have residentially zoned properties, all within the RS1 zoning district. Looking at our request, we have broken it down into two separate tracts. We have the commercial tract, which is the existing building that will be renovated, which is at that 2,840 square feet of commercial square footage. There's no expansion to that footprint with this request, and there's no change in the height. So we're utilizing the existing building, making the necessary renovations to bring that back up to stable condition post-hurricane and creating that package store sales. With this site design of Tract 1, we do maintain the two access points along the main frontages. The second tract, which is where we have the two different iterations of the master concept plan, this is the first iteration, which will be seen within an existing duplex to remain on site throughout this development. So this tract 2, again, this one existing duplex will remain, and that is part of our request with this petition. And the property to the north will be a conversion of the existing residential lot into a commercial parking lot.
So this represents master concept plan option 1.
Correct. It is listed throughout the staff report and all of the supporting documents as the alternate. And the next one is the primary. So this will be the end goal of the site. We have our package sale store in the corner, the existing parking lot on the north property, and that duplex being removed, which will ultimately become the second portion of the commercial parking lot, utilizing one entrance off of South Street with single access throughout the parking lot. Moving through, sticking with our package site, which is our Tract 1, we have our first deviation, and that request has been for the separation requirement from both that mobile home park that is across San Carlos Boulevard and the residential properties that are within close area to this. That deviation marker is shown right here on San Carlos Boulevard. And again, there are neighboring uses that also have the liquor as part of their business, so we are staying consistent with that, and staff was in agreement with this deviation request. Deviation number 2 is called out throughout the MCP for driveway connection separation. Because this site is utilizing the existing driveways on site, those separations would cause substantial changes to the site, and while we're trying to reuse the site, we didn't want to create a nuisance from traffic standpoint to be changing those ingress and egress points. So this is only applicable to our commercial tract, and staff was also in approval of the deviation request. Deviation number 3 is again only for the commercial site, and that is to eliminate the required plantings for the commercial building. The existing building does not have available frontage for the perimeter plantings because of how the driveway and the parking lot is already laid out, and since we are maintaining that throughout the build of this, we have added the additional landscaping along the north side of the building and the west side, but leaving that south and east side without the building perimeter plantings. And again, staff is in agreement with this because of the site constraints that already exist for the package sale store. Deviation number 4 was actually withdrawn as of the 48-hour letter, and that was a recommendation of withdrawal from staff. So it's removed, but it was for the separation along Tract 1. It's been removed. Sticking to deviation 5, as it is still relevant, staff is in recommendation of approval of this, and this is for the minimum width of the angled park. Ooh. Try again. Doop, doop. There we go. Wrong button. The drive aisle parking width to be maintained at the 12-foot. With the angled parking, again, we have the site constraints because we are reutilizing the existing commercial site. So we wanted to keep the drive aisles consistent with how they remain on site and still allow for that removal of the vehicle onto Main Street. And that vehicle sketch is showing that it is possible. And because of that sketch, staff is in recommendation of approval for that deviation as it is existing. Deviation number 6 is for the dumpster location as shown on our commercial site. This dumpster location is right off of the main entrance off of Main Street, and that location was chosen so that the garbage truck, though it does need to back out onto Main Street, the design was to have it as easy for the maneuvering of the garbage truck as possible, hence the location of the site and, again, those existing site constraints. Staff is in recommendation of approval with this. However, there is the condition that only solid waste vehicles will be the ones that will be permitted to exit off of Main Street in that backward motion. Deviation number 7 is the elimination of the 15-foot type D buffer along the east and south boundaries of Tract 1. This is, again, the existing commercial site. These deviations remain on site. The existing parking layout leaves very little room for that additional planting because it is already paved. However, we are maintaining the green space as along San Carlos and in the rear of the building. Staff is in recommendation of approval with this, as the pavement, with the condition that pavement may not encroach into the green space along San Carlos. The applicant is aware of that, and we will accept that condition. Deviation number 7 is the access road separation from an arterial roadway. That the request is to reduce the 100-foot separation down to 53 feet from the edge of San Carlos. Physical constraints of the building and the redoing of that existing site is why staff was in recommendation of approval. Deviation number 9 is an internal buffer for the parking lot site, and this is to reduce a 15-foot type C buffer down to a 5-foot type A buffer along the northern boundary. And this is only for the existing duplex. This duplex is not planning to be on site forever, but while it does remain, this deviation would be in effect, and there is no internal buffer, and the applicant is aware of the staff recommendation of approval. And our last deviation is deviation number 10. This is a reduction of the type E buffer with a wall down to a 15-foot type C buffer, also with the wall. And the wall will be an 8-foot masonry wall, and we will also include landscaping on the outside of the wall so it would be visible from the roadway. This is, again, to make sure that the visual screening is still in place from the commercial parking lot for the pedestrians or those driving by. Staff is in recommendation of approval of this. However, the wall must be fully opaque and shown on the DO plan.
Just that I understand, it's the width only that the deviation is for, the wall will be included, and the composition of the buffer will comply with code.
Correct, and we will acknowledge that the wall will be fully opaque at the time of DO. I will pass this over to our civil engineer, Ms. Stephanie Caldwell.
Okay, thank you. I was going to ask you that. I know. Good afternoon, Madam Hearing Examiner. Stephanie Caldwell for the record. As Patty had stated, this request includes 3 parcels: an existing commercial building, an existing duplex, and a vacant parcel. The existing commercial building seeks a change in use within the same development footprint. The vacant parcel is slated for a commercial parking area, and the existing duplex is intended to be an interim use, eventually being removed in favor for a second commercial area. From an engineering standpoint, the site design is straightforward. Nevertheless, we will comply with applicable local and state regulations. The water and sewer utilities are provided by LCU and are already available to each parcel. Stormwater management areas are proposed for the commercial parking parcels to offset the increased pavement coverage that will be a result. So you see here, this concept is titled alternate concept, although a more fitting description could be interim concept. As mentioned, the applicant wishes to retain the ability to use the existing duplex while the other 2 parcels are being developed and or redeveloped. The commercial parking parcel requires no utility service, and it proposes stormwater management areas to offset that increased pavement, and that's the green hatched area shown on this plan. The existing duplex will continue to use the same utility services as it does today and requires no stormwater management. The repurposed commercial building will also use the same utility services as it does today. It also does not propose stormwater management areas. And for this parcel, that's because this is considered a legally non-conforming development. For the benefit of everyone here today, a legally non-conforming development is allowed to be redeveloped as long as we don't increase the degree of nonconformity. So for this reason, the building footprint remains the same, the pavement coverage is essentially remaining the same. So by the definition of the legal nonconforming, and we acknowledge that there are site constraints that prevent us from fully complying with the land development code provisions, but that is why we don't have stormwater management areas proposed on this site. That said, I do want to bring up the fact that we have been working with county staff to try to decrease the degree of nonconformity as wherever possible, I'll say. Specifically, this driveway here, the eastern driveway, we've reconfigured and reduced the width to a standard 24-foot two-way drive aisle to increase its separation from San Carlos Boulevard. And here you'll see the ultimate build-out concept. In this scenario, the existing duplex is removed and is replaced with the second commercial parking area. The other two parcels remain the same. So for the redeveloped duplex parcel, it will also require no utility service, and it provides the stormwater management areas as shown here in green. So basically, to summarize the site design aspects, the repurposed commercial building will occupy the same building footprint and generally the same pavement coverage as it currently does. We did make the improvement here to the driveway to increase the separation from San Carlos Boulevard in order to facilitate a safer traffic circulation pattern. In this ultimate build out, I should mention the duplex is being replaced, but the other two parcels are not proposing any change from that interim condition. Let me see here. None of the three parcels will require utility service, or I should say, the two parking parcels require no utility service. The commercial building will utilize the same existing services, so no additional utilities will be required. And stormwater management areas are proposed for the commercial parking parcels to treat and attenuate the runoff that's generated over the increased pavement coverage. So unless you have any questions for me?
I do.
Yeah.
I'm having a little difficulty understanding the pedestrian circulation plan for this parking lot, because it appears to me that it's being designed to interconnect with a commercial property that's not the subject of this zoning application. Is that correct?
That is correct, and I believe that is a provision in the land development code for interconnectivity. It was something that was brought up by county staff as we were going through this process.
And does the design, when I read the staff report, my understanding was this lot would perhaps be overflow for that commercial business, but also be connected in some way to a park and ride option for employees and visitors to Fort Myers Beach. So I need clarification on what is the pedestrian access from that site to the nearest bus stop, for instance?
You're talking about the commercial parking parcels on
Yes.
South Street? That is something that I guess we'll have to work out as we get further into it. I know the parking parcels are intended for commercial parking for perhaps trolley transit to the beach, but
Charlie's not going to stop right there. right?
No, understood, understood. And yeah, I can say I know there's not a sidewalk, because there's no sidewalk on South Street, so that is something that we'll have to look into deeper as we get into the weeds with the detailed design.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Yuri, there you go.
Good afternoon. For the record, Yuri Baika with TR Transportation Consultants. I've been sworn in and previously accepted as an expert in transportation planning. We prepared a traffic impact statement for this rezoning application, which is seeking a CPD approval to allow for a 2,840 square foot package store and up to 33 commercial parking spaces. As part of our traffic analysis, we first prepared our typical trip generation calculations consistent with the latest IT trip generation manual, which is a required source for us to use to come up with traffic projections for projects. We then took the trips generated by this project and added them to the surrounding roadway network and completed our typical link level service analysis. And the results of our link level service analysis indicated San Carlos Boulevard, which is a state-maintained roadway, to operate acceptable level of service C, both with and without the project traffic in the future traffic conditions. As part of our traffic analysis, we also prepared intersection analysis at San Carlos Boulevard and Main Street, which is an off-site intersection. That intersection is being improved with a traffic signal as part of the ongoing improvement project that FDOT is working on San Carlos Boulevard. And that improvement is anticipated to be completed by spring of next year. So again,
The intersection improvement that you speak of,
the entire improvement project along San Carlos Boulevard, which includes also modifying that bridge to Fort Myers Beach with 2 southbound lanes and 1 northbound lane. So the entire project.
spring of '26.
Yep, that's what it says on FDOT's website.
Get them on the beach, they can be bumper to bumper on the way home, is that it?
And so we analyzed that intersection as a future traffic signal and indicated no level of service issues with our project. And as part of the intersection analysis, it's maybe a little bit too detailed at this point, but we also included the traffic volumes from the Bay Harbor Marina Village MPD that was recently approved on the east side. So we made sure that we utilized all the traffic volumes that potentially could use that intersection. I know that project was recently approved. We also analyzed a couple other intersections, Main Street and South Street, as well as the project driveways serving this development. And the results of that intersection analysis indicated no level of service issues and nothing significant in terms of delays. And that's all we did as part of rezoning a traffic analysis. Again, should this rezoning be approved, we still have to go through a development order process. At that time, we will do another traffic analysis, which would be a little more detailed. We'll look at on-site improvements, such as chart lanes if needed, etc. The staff has reviewed our traffic report, which was completed consistent with the Lee County traffic study guidelines for rezoning applications, and determined that this project will not have a detrimental impact onto the surrounding roadway system. And so, in my professional opinion, this project is consistent with the transportation element of the Lee Plan and the Land Development Code.
Thank you very much, I don't have questions.
Thank you. And I'll pass it on to Patty, who will finish up the presentation.
Thanks, Gary. Thank you. I'm not going to take us through the Lee Plan analysis and the Land Development Code analysis for a hearing examiner review and also for a rezone petition. So looking at our Lee Plan for this site and the consistency from our development to the Lee Plan, we've gone through within the staff report and within the narrative that was provided with the submittal, each Lee Plan policy and objective that we are consistent with, but just highlighting a few of them. The urban community, again, our future land use designation, this CPD does support the redevelopment of an existing site by utilizing the same building. We are within a predominantly commercial block, so that redevelopment of a commercial structure versus a rezone to a non-commercial structure keeps us consistent with that policy 1.1.4. For residential protection, we do maintain the duplex on the South Street side. And the commercial parking lot, once it is developed, it is maintaining that residential consistency by providing that 8-foot wall with the additional landscaping on the outside of that wall to buffer it from the neighboring residential across the street. The commercial uses, there are adequate infrastructure and access to the site as deemed by our 2 previous experts here. And the surrounding land uses are compatible with the development of the commercial portion of the site. We know the businesses that are surrounding this site and even future ones that will be coming. So that was consistent with. We've talked about the green space, though we do have a few site constraints. We do utilize as much green space as necessary and as obtainable on the site to have a well-done design on it. We are within the San Carlos Island community. There are no goals that we are applicable to, but we did review against them, and staff did do a review for LEED plan consistency and deem that we are within approval for that.
This was in the San Carlos Island Overlay District.
Correct.
Any of those regulations come into play here?
We read through them all, but none that would call out. The one that is most adjacent is that the parking lot, when it's developed, it is not utilizing public funds for that. It's a privately developed parking lot, and that's in 32.2.1. So now we're going to look at the land development code, and we have 2 separate slides for this. We have the criteria for the hearing examiner that we must be found consistent with. The first one being which it complies.
I can speak to it for a second if you want right now.
No, I'll wait
Okay.
till your presentation. Okay.
All right, running through. So we are in compliance with the LEED plan as I discussed with that last slide. We are consistent with the land development code as much as possible, and any parts that we are not able to be consistent with, we do qualify for deviations and have staff recommendation of approval for those deviations. We've talked about the compatibility of the existing surrounding area. We've talked about the access and the infrastructure that's needed for this development to take place. And this development will not adversely affect any environmentally critically or sensitive areas, as we have none. And moving it over to the criteria needed for a planned development rezoning specifically, we have 3 criteria. The proposed use or mix of uses is appropriate at the proposed location. Again, we've talked about the surrounding commercial development and also the surrounding residential development. The recommended conditions are sufficient safeguards for the public interest. There are a few conditions that staff has included in their request, including that additional landscape with that 8-foot wall that we will be in compliance with, and that each deviation being requested has a good reason. We went through each deviation individually, and we have withdrawn number 4 as recommended by staff. So taking this a little bit higher level, we do show consistency with that LEED plan, both as the urban community future land use and that San Carlos Island policies that we spoke about, though none were applicable directly to the site, that does deem compliance with it. With the support of the infill, we are a local business and we are reutilizing and revitalizing a site. We do meet the criteria for the LDC or the deviation criteria. We've, again, dropped it down to the 9 deviations. All of them are justified by site constraints or the existing conditions of the site, and we do have staff recommendation of approval on those. We've talked about compatibility and just the adequate access. Again, we had Stephanie Caldwell, the engineer, speak to the driveways and why they are positioned and dimensioned the way that they are. So we are in excess of meeting the standards or meeting all of the standards. So as our conclusion, staff did recommend approval of this. The applicant, myself, is in agreement with the staff report and the recommended conditions of approval. We've ran through the consistency with the LDC and the LEED plan, and we are requesting approval of this commercial plan development.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Adam, if we can address the San Carlos Island Overlay District at the outset, that would be helpful.
Okay.
Exhibit I in the Land Development Code.
Good afternoon, Madam Hearing Examiner, Madam Court Reporter. For the record, I'm Adam Mendez. I'm a principal planner with the Community Development Zoning Section. I have been previously tendered as an expert witness with respect to the Lee County Land Development Code and Comprehensive Plan. I am seeking to be tendered as such for this presentation. I have 3 exhibits I'd like to submit into the record. The first is the affidavit of publication. Understand that the Exhibit 1 is the staff report.
That's correct. So this will be Exhibit 2, affidavit of publication.
Exhibit 3 is going to be staff PowerPoint presentation. And Exhibit 4 is going to be a strike through and underline of deviation 1, which pertains to the separation requirements for a package store that we want to discuss through this PowerPoint slideshow. It's really more of a clarification, but we'll get into the merit of it during this presentation. That will complete my exhibits that I will hand in to you.
Thank you. I will mark them once I have them. So this strike-through underline exhibit, applicant exhibit, not applicant, staff exhibit 4. Is this a point of departure between you and the applicant regarding the wording of this deviation?
I don't believe so. This is new to them, so I'll let them digest it. As we were preparing the PowerPoint presentation, we're putting language on the screen. We saw a point of clarification that needed to be addressed. So I don't think that there's a opposition in it. So what this is it's staff exhibit 4 is page 2 of 4 of staff attachment E, the conditions document that were originally prepared with the staff report. So it's just a addendum to that essentially.
But this is what you'd like to see in the recommendation, correct?
Yes. Okay. Well, I'll begin by saying that that was an excellent presentation, walking through all the deviations. I'll touch on the conditions and the review criteria. I believe Mrs. Kalok, if I say that correctly? Kalak, sorry about that. I believe she hit those in order, and so I'll try to stick to the meat of the request and maybe some of the concerns you might hear in public comment and staff's position on some of the deviations and really the merits of this CPD and the adjacent non-conforming adult establishment, how the relationship of those are either applicable in this instance or not applicable in the context of what we're rezoning and what that is. So I'll start off with just a couple miles here across the spread here. You'll see San Carlos Island and the subject property kind of central to the San Carlos Boulevard corridor on the island. But when I'm discussing San Carlos Island, I'm also discussing Goal 32 of the Lee Plan. That's the San Carlos Island Community Plan area. You've heard here that the goals, objectives, and policies in that goal aren't necessarily germane to this request, and that's because the meat of that goal pertain to the working waterfront, the water-dependent overlay that's adopted as an appendix to the Lee Plan or another map of the Lee Plan. And then also the destination resort mixed-use water-dependent overlay, which is a unique future land use category that you'll see in the color palette of future land uses. You'll see in the attachment C coming up here. And that's a resort-based mixed-use future land use category unique to San Carlos Island. It recognizes that this is a primary corridor to a major county attraction that is Fort Myers Beach. This is a very tourist commercial area, so resort land uses and a mixture of other land uses that we'll touch on exist or can exist on the island in kind of the fabric of San Carlos Island. I have this slide up here, and this is just the aerial. We're honed in a little closer so we can make out some of the details. of the existing building envelope, the existing duplex on the subject property, and the shape of this commercial plan development, really. And the purpose of this slide is because I'm going to jump forward to where you're going to see the color palette of zoning districts and future land use categories that comprise San Carlos Island. And so the first exhibit here is it's attachment C of the staff report. It's one of the maps, the zoning map, and you can see the quite colorful here when we're talking about the zoning districts that comprise the area and how this fits within the fabric of that. And so I did my best here. I did superimpose an orange line around here to define what is block 6. And when I say block 6, I mean the platted block 6 that makes up, that this property makes up a portion of. And I bring that up because in the staff report, we try to make a point to, is it appropriate to increase the depth of commercial zoning on this lot in principle? And so in that discussion, we look at what block 6 is. And what block 6 is, as you can tell, if you understand that the green is residential zoning and all the other colors are non-residential zoning, you can see it's already comprised of primarily commercial zoning, and that's a typical pattern adjacent to a major thoroughfare that is San Carlos Boulevard, a arterial road leading to Matanzas Pass Bridge. And so what we're seeing here is we're just increasing the commercial depth on the property, or the commercial depth of this block, down to South Street, which really acts like a reverse frontage street in the context of how this block is emerging with rezonings over the years. Another thing I'd like to point out is that this TFC2 zone parcel is actually not developed as a residential land use. It's actually the primary lift station for Lee County Utilities. It services all of Fort Myers Beach, or a majority of Fort Myers Beach and all of San Carlos Island. So this particular parcel here, as you can see in this slide here, it's actually in the public facilities future land use category. So for the purpose of looking at that block as a whole, we really just have, outside of the request here, 2 remnant residential land uses on the east side of San Carlos Boulevard that are already in a relationship with the commercial progression of this block 6 here. The future land use map, just as colorful. We've got central urban community, which the subject property is within. Suburban, which is going to describe all of the predominant residential areas, more so west of South Street. South Street is going to be that reverse frontage road, I call it, that it runs behind block 6. We've got a lot of industrial development, future land use category. We've got the public facilities, future land use category, again, the lift station, and then the county-owned parking lot.
And where is that?
So that's going to be right here, just on the south side of Main Street. So in the staff report, we broke this down into 2 tracks. We're really looking at the uses that are proposed in this commercial plan development and where they're going. And for the purpose of the staff analysis, we said that the commercial parking or commercial parking in existing duplex are track 2, and the schedule of uses, which are the conditions before you, they limit the use of this property to commercial parking and retention of the duplex in that interim state that they discussed. If we look at it that way, this is de facto, this portion of this property is de facto a commercial parking zone, the CP zone. And if you look at the CP zone, which is a conventional zone, it's also across the street of Main Street. That's what the county-owned park and ride is, zoned. It's CP. If you look at the purpose and intent of the CP district in Land Development Code Section 34-841, it is to facilitate the provision of automobile parking subordinate to other land uses on other parcels of land where it is not appropriate to permit the full range of uses allowed by the zoning district under which the principal use is allowed. So the CP district that this is de facto becoming, if the conditions are adopted as recommended concerning the use is limited to commercial parking, it is a transitional use. It's an appropriate use in this particular area of Block 6. We looked at the block as a whole. We've looked at the separation of South Street before you reach the suburban land uses that are predominantly residential. And we've recommended the condition that if there's a deviation from the required buffer that's 25 feet wide, that the wall must be masonry. That's that's a betterment. That condition does not exist in the Land Development Code. That is a recommendation special to this project. And as we know, the denser the material, masonry wall, the higher the wall, the better the sound attenuation. And we certainly feel that that's going to be imperative to maintaining a greater sense of compatibility with what is a fairly small commercial parking lot. 33 spaces in the, I believe they called it the final, or the final destination of this development. And then I think only about 16 spaces for the option where the duplex is retained for a period of time. So case in point there, commercial parking extended into the depth of Block 6 is certainly consistent. It's an appropriate land use in the context of the urban future land use category. I have a couple examples here of commercial parking lots. I bring these to your attention because I am familiar with them. They don't necessarily amount to all of the commercial parking lot zones that are out in the county, but I wanted to bring these to your attention as they've been approved and adopted by either the Board of County Commissioners or the hearing examiner. And these examples are in Lehigh. So the first commercial parking lot we have are located at 3001 4th Street West. You can see that it's at the intersection of 4th Street West and Joan Avenue North in Lehigh, just south of Lee Boulevard. And we can see what they did with the constraint of commercial zone land on Lee Boulevard is they've actually expanded commercial parking opportunity on the opposite side of the street, wedged into existing single-family residential lots. So this is an example of where perhaps the full suite of commercial land uses isn't appropriate in proximity to residential, but the subordinate parking of vehicles is something that's thought to, with the appropriate conditions, be something that can work to help facilitate additional parking for sites that are already constrained with parking. The second example, we're on the north side of Lee Boulevard here. The address is 2916 5th Street West. The same example applies. They're across the street in the residential block. And this is just kind of how this zoning district is applied, at least in Lee County in some instances. So if we look at the commercial parking, de facto commercial parking district that we have as track 2, it's not nestled into that residential block. It's separated by a 60-foot wide right-of-way that is South Street. We have conditions. Part of this plan development provides us the ability to condition it, unlike the conventional zoning district we're looking at here, to enhance compatibility. And I think we've reached that with our recommendation for this component. The second piece of this I'd like to discuss is, and it kind of relates to what you were discussing, and that's, well, how do folks get from this parking lot during the day, if they're using this for beach parking or they're using it for some sort of other establishment in proximity that lacks in parking, which is prevalent in this area, how do they get from this particular site into the rest of the network? And I want to point out the existing facilities right now. So along San Carlos Boulevard, there is a sidewalk on the west side, if I get my directional cardinals correct, runs along this. There's no sidewalk on Main Street. There's no sidewalk or pedestrian way on South Street. The commercial park and ride is directly across Main Street. As part of any local development order approval to develop this site, the applicant would be subject to Land Development Code Section 10-256. That's the pedestrian ways and bikeways. That is by virtue of this is undeveloped. That is staff's position, is this is an undeveloped piece of property. There's currently a code violation for open storage without the correct zoning district. It's TFC2 zoned without the required development order. It's staff's position this is undeveloped, and I'll walk you through why we think that's the case, because it's critical to the point that 10-256 will apply if this is undeveloped. And then we'll move on to the road standards, where there's sidewalks required on that, and I'll try to thread the needle to both, but I'm going to go to a series of aerials. This is from April 16th, 1980. I've done my best to kind of geo-rectify the approximate location of the parcel that's undeveloped, the TFC2 undeveloped, that has the code violation for open storage. You can make out The sewage lift station, you can also make out the duplex. So just north of the duplex, you can see just the contrast of colors. There's some foliage there. It's wooded. You can see everything around it's not wooded. This is an important date because this is pre-DSO or pre-development standards ordinance. So prior to this, at this time, there wasn't a development standards ordinance. Development orders weren't a thing in Lee County yet, to my knowledge. And this next slide, a little brighter, it's the same kind of idea here. You can see it's fairly wooded. I'd call it undeveloped. There's no development order at this stage. This is after the Development Standards Ordinance in 1983. And if you want to look back to 1968, same applies. It's been undeveloped in our opinion, so it's kind of critical in the development order stage later on when we're assessing which code provisions are applicable if they are going to develop this site with a commercial parking lot. The second component of this is Tract 1 that's referenced in the staff report. And what it is really is it's retail with 3 potential principal uses. The one of discussion, the one of, I imagine most concern is the package store. That's partly due that there's deviations requested from typical separations that are required for package stores. And that's a 500-foot distance. That's measured from dwelling units under separate ownerships, schools, parks, I believe hospitals, things of that nature. And in this particular zoning district right now that it currently is, it does permit a package store. It would have to meet these particular distances or seek a variance from those distances. The C1 district that's currently zoned permits fairly intensive uses, to name a few that are referenced in the staff report: vehicle dealerships, car washes, convenience food and beverage stores with fuel pumps without any hourly operation requirements in terms of whether they're 24 hours or not 24 hours, fast food restaurants. Those are all possible uses that can be permitted in the C1 district. I'd say if I were guessing, 70 to 80 principal uses are permitted in the C1 district. We're reducing that down to 13. 13 principal uses. The other 12 are fairly benign. They're typical business services or retail uses. So we're definitely coming up with a more predictable outlook on what is possible at this property. So moving on to the deviation, and I'll just point out in the master concept plan, I've highlighted the distance separations that were referenced on the master concept plan to signify the distance between the nearest public entrance or exit of the package store that's anticipated to the nearest property line of the dwelling unit under separate ownership. That was the deviation, how it was initially crafted. But if we look close at the regulation, that is Land Development Code Section 1263, off-site consumption or the sale for consumption off premises. You can see it says no package store or other establishment primarily engaged in the retail sale of liquor for consumption off-site shall be permitted any closer than 500 feet to, and we say religious facility, school, daycare, dwelling unit under separate ownership, park, and then it goes on to say, or from any other establishment primarily engaged in the sale of alcoholic beverages. A conservative look at that would be, are there bars nearby? Whether the sale is for on-premises or off-premises. And the answer to that is yes, there is within 500 feet bar or cocktail lounge within 500 feet of this establishment. It's actually the parcel directly to the north. So in our recommended deviation language, we'd like to memorialize this distance here. And this distance this blue line represents is 100 feet. And that's going to be measured, if you can see it's a faint line, it's from the approximate door of the establishment that it would conceptually be a package store, and then the approximate location of the door of the neighboring property, which does primarily sell alcoholic beverages. And in order to pass the bar of granting a deviation, the Board of County Commissioners must make the following findings, and that's that the deviation enhances the objectives of the plan development. I think here the objective is to find reuse of this existing building, that market demand is determined that a package store is something that would be successful here. So they kind of outline their own objectives here, that's going to enhance their objective to to reuse this building. And then the second component is that it preserves and promotes the general intent of the chapter to protect public health, safety, and welfare. And during our deviation analysis, really the critical piece of the separation was to the dwelling units. It wasn't necessarily to other establishments that serve alcohol. There are other establishments on San Carlos Island that cater to drinking. There's bars and cocktail lounges. There's restaurants. This is a tourist commercial destination. It has a tourist future land use category in the destination mixed use resort, water dependent future land use. The location of the package store is on a arterial road, which we believe provides adequate separation to the nearest residential on the opposite side. And then on the back end, towards the suburban lands, we have a sewage lift station and existing development that adequately screen this in addition to South Street. So we think our focus on the deviation is its separation. It's the existing door faces the arterial road. The condition is written, or the deviation is granted in that manner, that it's going to be compatible with the surrounding land uses, and in that it is consistent with public health, safety, and welfare. This is the revision to the condition and strike through and underline, with the red underline being the additional language that's before you as Staff Exhibit 4. Our recommendation stands as approval for those reasons I just presented. One of the only conditions in this document that aren't typical of a plan development, and I'm going to refer you to page 2 of 4 of staff recommended conditions, attachment E, is nighttime or night parking operations. And that is a condition that recognizes the parking lot could also be used for overflow parking of the nearby adult establishment, and that in such that there is a reasonable nexus to require that there is a parking attendant that's there at all hours of nighttime hours that are specified in the condition to ensure that there's a peaceful operation of the parking lot, deterring people who are playing music in their car, people who are shouting at late hours, and that's a condition that's very similar to the condition that was adopted on the actual adult establishment itself for their COP approval in 2011. They had to have a nighttime security to patrol this site that's not outside of the scope of this commercial plan development to ensure that the nighttime operation did not create a nuisance on the neighborhood. I think what you might hear is some of the temporary use of this establishment post-hurricane, the use of the tent, the use of porta potties or portables, and the sound that was heard. That's a temporary condition that is not permitted by right. Those uses would have to remain indoors upon completion of the build back. That build back is rooted in the Lee Plan and Land Development Code. The property owner has the right to build back a non-conforming use if it is substantially destroyed by a hurricane or other natural hazard. That's just a background condition. And this particular application is not directly linked to that. The operation of that particular parcel has no inference on really what we're considering here. We're considering a package store or a retail or professional office and commercial parking. The relationship of which we have a condition, that's condition 3 of the staff report. And so with that, if you have any questions of me, I'm happy to answer. If the applicant has any questions,
I want to
standing by.
circle back to the
Chapter 33 regulations.
overlay in the LDC pertaining to this part of San Carlos Island. This property is clearly within it.
Mhm.
My understanding is that those regulations are an opt-in situation. Is that consistent with your understanding?
Yes, it was a redevelopment overlay. It was for the blighted. It was adopted because at that time it was thought of as blighted. So they enacted, the Board of County Commissioners enacted provisions that would allow a developer to opt into these regulations. And in so, they could potentially avoid rezoning, going through the arduous process of rezoning, the year or 2 year long process. And in that, those Chapter 33 provisions provide additional use and development standard flexibility.
Yeah, relief from.
So your variances aren't required, rezoning's not required in some of these instances. It lines up with their vision with the water dependent overlay. If you opt into them, it was contractual. You were obligated to then completely opt in. You can't half opt in, half opt out. In this case, they're not opting in. We're complying with the standards in chapters 34, chapter 10, and the balance of the land development code. We're not opting into those provisions. So if that answers your question,
Okay, thank you. I felt as though it should be addressed since it falls clearly within its boundaries. So
yes.
now we have that on the record.
I have one quick question, Mr. Mendez. Does the Land Development Code have any requirements for commercial interconnectivity of parking lots or interconnectivity between commercial lots?
Yes, that's going to be in chapter 34, and that's the parking division where parking lot interconnections for pedestrians are required.
Is one of the reasonings for the interconnectivity of commercial parcels to reduce the traffic on arterial roadways to allow alternative modes of traffic?
Yeah, and you're so sorry, maybe I misunderstood you. I thought you were talking about pedestrian interconnections. Parking lot interconnections, I believe, are also required of both chapter 34 and chapter 10. So yes, for a parking lot interconnection, that is a requirement. That's not if they opted not to, another deviation would be before you.
What are your thoughts about in the description in the staff report and applicant's narrative that the intent that this would serve as a park and ride type of lot? What are your thoughts on what accommodations have been made for pedestrian traversing to and from this lot to, I'm imagining, some sort of bus stop somewhere on San Carlos Island?
That's a good question, and sorry I didn't hit on it when I was talking about whether this is considered developed or not, because as you know, when this comes in for a DO, this is already developed. There's not really a lot to enact here, maybe some landscaping required of this PD. So when we're talking about a development order tripping requirements like sidewalks and road widening, I want to point your attention to South Street's currently about 16 feet wide in pavement width. That's insufficient for the future land use category it exists in. 22 feet of total road pavements required for 11-foot travel lanes. So any development order to develop a commercial parking lot here, they'll have to widen the road to meet current county standards, and that's going to be at the cost of the developer. In addition to that, in Chapter 10-296 and 10-256, sidewalks are required along these roads. That is another trigger, is development order. The development order is going to trigger that they have a sidewalk along South Street. We've looked at the dimensions of South Street. It's a 60-foot wide right-of-way. We've looked at the additional pavement that'd be required and the open drainage system that currently exists, and there's certainly room for design for the required 6-foot sidewalk leading from this property line down and then all the way connecting to the existing sidewalk on San Carlos Boulevard. I'm sure that accommodations can be made for a pedestrian across Main Street potentially with some appropriate signage to get you to the park and ride component. But once we connect to this sidewalk here, you are now connected to the sidewalk grid of the island, and you can get to potential bus stops. It's certainly plausible. And my testimony here is that those regulations are applicable. There's no deviations that are requested with this zoning action before you. And so we anticipate safe pedestrian accommodations and safe travel lanes to accommodate this project should it be developed.
And that would come into play upon the improvement of that lot into a commercial parking lot.
Yes, Madam Hearing Examiner.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I don't have any further questions.
None as well.
Do you need a break? Okay. We are going to turn to public input now. John and Sandy Zombek, I'm sorry if I'm butchering your name.
That's okay.
Would you like to speak? And if so, please come to the podium.
I'd like to speak last, please. Is that possible?
Okay. Yeah.
Thank you.
What about Sandy?
She's with me. It's all this one.
Okay. Christy Hennessy?
I have the map up so they can point.
Christy Hennessy, I'm at live at 821 San Carlos Drive.
Can you show us where you are on this map so we get an idea?
I think that's,
That's
oh
it.
yeah, that's me. Oh, no, it says 821. And we own this lot here. as well.
So you have a house on one lot and you own the lot across?
Yeah.
Okay.
We were going to build a guest house there, but in light of not knowing what it's going to happen with all the junk behind us, we were waiting. One positive is this will clean up a property that has been a junkyard for the Semmer family, Terry Prasad, and Joe Orlandini for many years, long before Hurricane Ian. To this very day, it's still a junkyard with debris dumped there from off-site. There were more dump trucks coming today, dumping more debris from off-site. Second positive is the 8-foot opaque wall. That would help shield adjacent residences, and with the landscaping, that's a positive too. Third positive, the night guard from 7 p.m. to 2 a.m. would be of help for our family-centered neighborhood. Keynote problems with this property. Wanting the strip club parking lot across of South Street, a condition should be that they widen South Street, which Adam addressed. Should be a full and it floods every rain. Main Street and South Street flood every rain. Now, San Carlos Drive, that has already been nice. We have curbs. It's a wider road. It's very different from South Street. When the Vixen Strip Club opened last winter with the tent and stripper pole inside, Lee County allowed 3 tall feather flags out front along San Carlos Boulevard with lettering "Girls, Girls, Girls" on each of the flags. One evening, my neighbor and I heard an ambulance, and we walked over to see what that was all about. A mock-up ambulance was delivering strippers with the wording, "Girls so hot, they'll give you a heart attack." I'll refrain from telling you what my neighbor and I saw one male customer doing in his car alone in the parking lot. So think the kind of people that we're going to have. Another issue is the vehicle headlights exiting the strip club at all hours of the night. It's going to shine right into people's windows. That's a problem. This is pertinent to this zoning case because this is what we will have to deal with, having even one exit opening from the strip club parking lot. This establishment will also attract loud motorcycles that already awaken us at night flying along San Carlos Boulevard. How does this affect my own personal property? We own the undeveloped residential lot across from our waterfront lot on San Carlos Drive. Our undeveloped lot we plan to build a guest house on backs up to South Street, and it's just been too junky back there. I'll leave you with this. The very first greeting at the base of Matanzas Pass Bridge, going over to Crescent Beach Family Park, is a strip club. Please be mindful and considerate of neighboring properties, but also the residents of Fort Myers Beach on the approach to their island.
Can I have a copy of what you read? Some of the names I'm not familiar with.
Oh, you would be if you're in Fort Myers Beach.
Thank you. Sam Stouter?
Is there a clicker?
Yeah, I'll get you your clicker and I'll get your PowerPoint pulled up.
Does he have his own PowerPoint?
I don't think, do you have a paper copy of it for the hearing examiner?
Yes, I do. Would you like me to get that?
Yeah, so I can mark it as an exhibit for the board.
One moment, please.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
You're welcome. Red light's the pointer. You want to use it?
Okay, thanks.
This is Stan Stouter. exhibit number 1, and it is a paper copy of his PowerPoint presentation.
Madam Hearing Examiner, greetings. My name's Stan Stouter for the record. I'm not here as an expert in anything. I am here, though, as the managing member of 2865 Rockville LLC, which owns this parcel right here. So this is the Main Street parking lot. This is an 18-unit RV mobile home park that was completely decimated by Hurricane Ian. I am the owner of that property, and my intention is to redevelop that property to a greater glory than it was as an RV and mobile home park. I have significant concerns about the affairs of today. My request today is the denial of the rezoning of tracts 1 and 2 to protect our community's character, health, safety, welfare, and in compliance with LDC and urban community designation on the future land use map. There are 2 separate LLCs that have the same managing member that owns tracts 1, 2, and the strip club. They're all under unified control. Though they are 2 different LLCs, they have the same managing member. I am concerned that given all these parcels under unified control, today's application is really just a furtive attempt to expand the existing non-conforming strip club use by today's rezoning action. I will address specifically the deviations requested, but if you will allow me, I would like to offer some context before we do that. Through public records, I was able to procure this building plan that was originally submitted to the building department to renovate what was to be a liquor store. I would like to call your attention specifically to this area of the structure. I would also ask that you keep in your memory the demising walls, because I'm going to show you a different one that was superseded this one. When you look at this one, what you'll see right here highlighted in yellow, and I don't know if you can read that, but it's 5 cosmetic stations that are for makeup and preparation. Now, I've not been to a lot of liquor stores, but I haven't really been to one that's needed cosmetic stations, so I can go in and buy their wares. Accompanying that, you'll find behind it dressing rooms with lockers. Again, I have not been to a lot of liquor stores, but I have not seen one where I needed a dressing room and a locker or an interview room. So when this building plan was initially submitted, this was how it was described, which to me is absolute verification that this is not just a liquor store, but this is an ancillary use to expand the current non-conforming use by using an accessory building. When that came clear, they have then resubmitted a different plan. Note again the existing demising walls in this first submittal. What do you notice? It's the same plan, only they took the labeling off because it revealed their true intention is to use this as a preparation room for the dancers of the entertainment, if you will, that would merely be in the building next door sharing a common boundary line. This does give me grave concern. I intend to have families with RVs, motor coaches. My property, as you will recall, is 156 feet border to border from what the staff has identified as tract 1. This is also imperiling the future almost $15 million water pumping station that will supplant the now commercial parking lot. My research has revealed that the water pumping station that provides pressure for most of Fort Myers Beach is being relocated from Moss Marine across the bay to here. So we have a $15 million infrastructure investment that's coming, and it is also in proximity to this liquor store pseudo dressing room, locker room for the Vixen's use. I would now like to call your attention to, excuse me, the site plan, which I believe they refer to it as the ultimate site plan. I would refer to it as the ultimate insult to people that live in this area. I would like to note that on this site plan iteration, they are showing 2 access points to South Street. This is problematic for a number of reasons. One, it creates incursion into the residential neighborhood immediately to the west. 2, as Mr. Mendez pointed out, South Street is currently a 16-foot wide roadway. Though it would need in the development order to be expanded to 22 with pedestrian walkways, it is not striped, it's not in sufficient length or width for any type of incursion from even a more sanitized use. But notice when you come to the travel path of South Street, which can't or is not going to be changed, if you were to go to South Street to its northern terminus, you would come into San Carlos Court, which at its northern terminus of about 200 yards, maybe less, goes into Prescott. The image to the right shows how Prescott intersects with the intersection where the existing light is the dual lights. I've lived on Fort Myers Beach 40 years. I've gone through these intersections a few times. When I go to check on my future RV restoration, you can't get from Prescott, which is the way that South Street would take you, you can't get from Prescott to that light. There is not even a 1-car stacking lane. I cannot make a right at Prescott such as to not be over the stop bar at that intersection. The stacking lane there is completely insufficient, and to drive that traffic down South Street up San Carlos Court is imperiling the motorists that are there and does not have sufficient functionality. So then you might say, well, then they won't go down South Street. They'll come down. Now you're dragging that traffic down and around to San Carlos Drive or under the bridge. South Street is a non-starter. It is insufficient, even if improved. Furthermore, it does not, even with sidewalks and pedestrians, would be perilous to get from Main Street down to San Carlos Boulevard where you would be able to pick up traffic. That bus traffic at the county-owned park is going away. They're going to have to get to San Carlos Boulevard, and even with the light, crossing that intersection, as I have done, is perilous. We would urge denial of South Street access under all conditions. I would cite specifically that it contravenes Lee Plan Policy 5.1.5, Lee Plan Policy 6.11, and Plan 6.14. Any South Street access is an incursion to the residential neighborhoods that are there. Note also on this slide that the distance from the southwest corner of the proposed Track 1 to the boundary of the residence nearest to it is 216 feet, and that resident is here today, I'm told. So we urge denial of any South Street access under all conditions if you don't summarily quash the rezoning categorically for its veiled attempt to expand a non-conforming use.
Thank you. Anything further?
Yes, ma'am. If you go back to the site plan, you'll notice that there's an interconnectivity point between the Vixens Club and the proposed parking area. That, I'm sure, is so that it would be allowed for not only daytime parking, but also overflow parking, further increasing the intensity while not increasing the square footage to stay within the LDC of build back. Though they have doubled the cubic feet of the building, that parking lot with that interconnectivity is clearly an accessory use to Vixens, and it clearly allows for ingress and egress off of San Carlos Boulevard without intersecting into South Street. Let me ask you, is there any way that it could be compatible with residential neighborhoods if it requires a guard to stand watch over a parking area because of the cacophony that would be emanating, not to mention the lumens and the distraction and the type of untoward activity that the previous speaker referenced, is there anything about that that's compatible in a parking area with a nearby residential area? I think not. You could mandate access via San Carlos Boulevard through a cross-access easement agreement. Again, I remind you, it's under unified control, all of these parcels. And the Vixens parcel to reduce residential disruption. On track 1, I would ask that you, if you don't summarily deny this zoning, that you deny deviations number 2 and 8. Deviation number 2 is opposing reducing driveway separation from 60 feet to 49 feet on Main Street. These 2 driveways fail to meet LDC section 10-285-A. Let me go back to the supposed 2 curb cuts are part of the site plan that you were shown. That first curb cut, you have to do virtually a 180. When you come off San Carlos Boulevard, that's a hard 180 to get into that first curb cut. I would recommend as an alternative that that curb cut that is most easterly be closed in its entirety, and that if there is a curb cut on Main Street, that it be the westernmost curb cut, and that it allow the cars to exit and have a stacking lane to get to the future light that will be at Main Street. Deviation number 8, oppose reducing arterial separation from 100 feet to 53 feet from San Carlos Boulevard's edge per LDC section 10-285B. This is increasing conflicts in a tourist-heavy corridor. I used to go to the Observer. I used to place ads and do things with them. And that first curb cut needs to go away. It is dangerous. Consolidate it into one existing western driveway on Main Street. This would enhance stacking spaces for the new signal, maintains an existing curb cut access, and it doesn't conflict with the intersection separation. Community compatibility, land use issues, tract A issues, tract 2, commercial parking incompatibility. The 33-space commercial parking lot disrupts adjacent residential uses. We've already spoken about the extended hours, the lumens, the cacophonious noise, the fact that you have to have a guard. That's incompatible. I know that there's LDC requirements for lumens to not have leakage, and I know that the 8-foot fence, I'm developing a property, I have to put in an 8-foot fence. I understand what this is about. While it is helpful, it is not a safeguard from the incursions that these lights and other things would entail. I would argue that the proposed security guard is insufficient. If it were to be a deviation, it is an insufficient deviation. There needs to be a LCSO deputy on premises to regulate. Otherwise, a security guard is, I think, of insufficient force to mitigate these concerns. I would ask that you deny the package liquor store deviation number 1. It violates LDC's 34-1263E. The 500-foot distance requirement is 250 from San Carlos Boulevard and 275 from the South Street residence. It is barely 50% of what the code is requiring. Why would we have a code if we're going to have a deviation? 10%, but not 50%. It is a stark incursion into the residences that are nearby, including the RV park that I own. It poses significant risks to residential safety and quality of life. I would ask that you prohibit any uses that would enhance the non-conforming strip club use. I'm flummoxed as to how you can have a parking lot in a zoning hearing that has only one small corner contiguous to a similar property in the same hearing and construe that those two are not inseparable from the non-conforming use. It's further exacerbated by the fact, as the previous speaker said, that this neighbor has proven over the last several years, aside from the use, to not be a good neighbor. As the resident had alluded to, that now vacant parcel in Tract 2 has been a refuse home for trash and construction debris for years. Why would we think that that behavior that carries only a code enforcement penalty would be a precedence that we could rely on, that this parking lot that has, the application is to have not one but two curb cuts onto South Street, why would we have any confidence that that would be sustained in an orderly manner with respect for the people that are behind there? South Street access is a non-starter. I oppose additional deviations 1, 2, 3, 7, 8, 9, and 10, relaxing of buffers, parking, maneuvering standards as they reduce compatibility and safety. I conclude with this, Madam Hearing Examiner. I do believe this is a furtive attempt to use this zoning application to expand the intensity and functionality of the existing non-conforming strip club use. It is inconsistent with the urban community designation in San Carlos Island Community Plan, which prioritizes residential protection per Lee Plan Policy 5.1.5, that there be a full denial of any South Street access for Tract 2, except for current TFC zoning enforcements. Request denial of zonings tracts 1 and 2 to protect the public's health, safety, and welfare, and the sanctity of this community and the future tax base that this community derives. Those houses at a 1% of value, as well as my property at $3.5 million, using a 1 to 2% of value, we're all paying $30,000 to $50,000 a year in taxes, and there's a lot of us. And this would create a value diminishment by doing this zoning. So, Madam Hearing Examiner, I thank you for your time today, and I thank you for listening to my comments.
Thank you. John and Sandy Zombach. Good afternoon. Thank you for coming.
Thank you. I'm John Zombek. I am, I'm going to need this board to be,
Go ahead, you can approach.
can I approach it? Okay. So I'm the lucky guy that owns this property here. I bought this property 40 years ago because all these lots were available. It's the largest lot and the closest to Fort Myers Beach. I literally pull out my drive and the bridge is here. You know, that was, my wife and I built a new home and we're retiring here, and none of these plans we could ever foresee. I've met some of the people that are, there's actually, this residence is being used right now. I don't know if that's proper or not. And they fixed it up, and there's people living in there. And number two, the lot next door is, like the gentleman said, it is a trash. There's a dirt pile there that's at least 2 stories high. There's an old rusted trailer behind it. And it's been like that. Our residents, we've been there over 2 years and it hasn't changed. They don't care about the residents. They just are jamming stuff in there. Instead of when they digging up the parking lot and pile that dirt and have dump trucks there, carried away immediately, they didn't, because that costs money. So they just dumped it there. They're gonna have to move it sooner or later, but later, I guess, works better for them. And instead, when it's windy out and the wind's blowing, I have a swimming pool, it doesn't show there. It throws dust and dirt around. It's an eyesore. And if they need parking, I'm just wondering why. I'd like to approach all this vacant property here wasn't purchased to have a parking lot here and let this be residential still. I don't know. That sounds like a good idea to me. Okay. So I just want to vet that, and
Put the site plan back up, please.
it's just real bad for me, real bad. I'm the guy that's going to be dealing with all these people. Anytime there's an event on the beach where it gets so crazy, people come down and they park along the grass on South Street. Now, this is going to be crazy, if you have a club there, and that's not that very many parking lots, but what do they say, 33 parking spots, something like that, ish, okay? Well, if there's like 33 people in their establishment, they're gonna go out of business. There's gonna be 100 people, maybe 130 people in there. Where are they all gonna park? On my yard, neighbors' yards,
Do you have that superimposed on the aerial?
I mean, you can't survive on 33 parking spots.
Did you have a slide superimposed? I did not, but I can explain.
Okay, well, let's let him finish, and then talk.
So that's, obviously, there's gonna be a lot of traffic, headlights in and out, cars running, loud engines, motorcycles, I mean, you name it. I get it. I mean, I'm not a bad guy, but there's gotta be a different way to do this, have some kind of exit out.
Well, that was my main concern,
It's
is
just-
nighttime use of this lot. I mean, I would seriously consider prohibiting that because the exiting vehicles are gonna shine lights.
Right in my
into
house.
the homes right across the street, and
Yeah.
that's really not
Yep.
a tenable situation, but I'm gonna allow applicant to address that.
Yeah.
That was a concern I
Yeah,
had.
we gotta come up with another, you know, it's just, South Street, when people pull out, they're gonna go, okay, which way do they go home? They'll turn right or turn left. They're gonna go down South Street, or they may turn right and then turn right in front of my house and go, you know, they're drunk or they're not used to the area or something. They're gonna be wandering around.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you. Appreciate it.
Okay, so I'll share my concerns with this situation. I am not supportive of nighttime use of this lot for the reasons I have stated. I feel as though the lot should be gated during the evening and not used because of the proximity of residents across the road and the neighborhood across the road. I think you're introducing what could potentially be a very intrusive commercial use, commercial parking, with exiting vehicles with no choice but to come out the way you have it designed onto South Street. It would still allow for use for beach visitors and employees during the daytime hours, but in the evening, where it would be the most incompatible with the residents directly across the street, I think it's appropriate to limit the hours.
Understood.
And this issue of the relatedness of these parcels, I'm going to ask Adam to address that. If you feel as though additional time is needed to address that, I can continue this hearing so that I can allow for more exploration, because if, in fact, the testimony of this member of the public is in fact true, then we do have a circumvention of the county's regulations, which would clearly prohibit the expansion of a non-conforming use. And to the extent that it is likely that these improvements are intended to support the use on the non-conforming property, I feel as though additional testimony and evidence is necessary to either refute that or to rezone this into a CPD and redevelop the site or something else. But that's separate from this commercial parking lot, which I think potentially could be a good thing for the area, but not at all for a nighttime use. So what do you wish to do here, Adam?
If you don't mind, I'd just like to put a few remarks on the record, and I'll stand up at the podium to do so.
This is an excessive number of deviations for property of this size. So it begs the question of whether it's appropriate at this location as well.
I can speak to, again, Adam Mendes for the record. Staff went through their thought process on the relationship with this property and the adjacent non-conforming use, and whether or not this signified an expansion or an enlargement of a non-conforming use, which is not permitted by county regulations. And I'll start first and say we arrived at, if it is true that simply owning that building represents that it's going to be misused, that's not a basis for denial. You could remove the package store. There's still rooms. That's a code enforcement issue. what was represented to the county was caught. Those floor plans were denied. They revised them. If there is traffic going between those buildings, that's a code enforcement issue. So simply owning property isn't a basis for denial, common unified ownership. That's nowhere in our criteria to evaluate.
Well, I'm not suggesting
Yeah.
denial, I'm suggesting reevaluation of the application in light of this information.
I was rebutting Mr. Stouter, sorry. But the other component of this is the deviations. Why is there a lot of deviations? Well, if you look at the clusters of deviations, they're to memorialize existing development. Most of them relate to preserving parking. If you don't provide relief for buffers or building perimeter plantings or dumpster enclosures, all those clusters of deviations, you reduce parking that's already existing on the property. That Department of Transportation has reviewed the access points and deemed, based on the intensity of this development, we're talking less than 3,000 square feet of retail in a 33-space commercial parking lot, this isn't a high trip generator. And nor do the AM and PM trips that are expected of this, that actually put pressure on this, the surrounding roadways, they're not high trips. So we've had development services weigh in, our engineering section, to take a look at the functionality of these deviations, the backup parking, the buffer deviations. Those clusters are really to memorialize the existing building. Whether the use is appropriate or not is a determination ultimately made up by the board with your recommendation. I wanted to address one other issue that was brought up. Apologize. And it was brought up by multiple speakers here, is that the light shining, and that the county has a light ordinance. The county has a noise ordinance. The county does have sheriffs that will go out and investigate noises, regardless of whether or not an LCSO sheriff is stationed here as a condition of approval. Light would have to track, well, first off, we have specific light standards, and they're measured at the property line. That property line is South Street. Then we have 60 feet of area before we hit the nearest residence. So it seems almost implausible to me, if they're meeting the county's light standards, that there's going to be an intrusive photometric plan that comes before us. We've got substantial buffering with South Street.
Right,
So
I'm not that concerned about the lighting on the site. I understand our land development code regulations are quite strict.
yes.
And will eliminate any spillage. My concern is vehicles.
I think I'll leave that to the applicant to decide how they'd like to rebut or alter their design.
The other thing I wanted to speak to is condition 3 is basically unenforceable. So if that is in any way critical to your recommendation on this case, then I want you to reevaluate your recommendation, because code enforcement does not work in the evening, okay? And the sheriff's department is not going to enforce a zoning condition for the county. So if the idea is that the patrons of this lot would potentially be misbehaving or conducting themselves in a manner that it's necessary to have a guard on the property, then I think we need to take a closer look at compatibility with the surrounding neighborhood.
Understood.
That's it.
Thank you.
The applicant has heard your concerns, Madam Hearing Examiner, in light of some of the public comment and your comment about possibly continuing the rest to allow staff additional time to evaluate, and we are supportive of that. I'm not sure.
Okay. Well, I think I would feel more comfortable if there was more time spent and perhaps a revisiting of this application in light of the information we've heard from the public. I have been to this site once. I will go again, and I'm sure what I heard today will bring some of these concerns into sharper focus, and that may not be a good thing for the applicant. So I would like to allow more time and attention to this request, and I will need to speak with my secretary briefly. We'll go off the record for 10 minutes so that she can provide us with some potential dates for us all to look at, that A, gives you enough time to meet and discuss, and B, coincides with our hearing schedule for the next month or two.
Thank you.
We are back on the record. Have you had an opportunity to look at the dates?
Yes, Madam Hearing Examiner, I think the May 30th was discussed.
Oh, you know what, that day's not good for me. 28th, 27th,
Yep, 28th.
16th, 13th, 15th, 16th, and 23rd.
Then
You
we
can check my schedule.
So you have opposing availability to Adam.
Did you say you have, say that again, your availability, sorry?
I'm not available the week of the 27th.
Okay.
Oh,
What about Friday, May 23rd?
Yes,
Let me double
John
check.
can't do that. John can't do that.
9 a.m.?
I believe we have a conflict.
You might need some dates in June. Is June a
Yeah,
possibility?
June's possible.
Yeah, sorry. We might need to just take some look
Okay.
at June.
Thank you.
We need dates in June? I think either a morning or afternoon is sufficient,
Yes.
right?
Agreed.
Oh, here, I gotta make a note on one of those.
I just wanted to get the spellings. While we have a second.
Okay.
Just the last one.
Okay. You're perfect. Thank you. Thank you. And at that hearing, maybe you can give me a codified list of conditions and deviations?
We're off the record. Do you want to go on the record? I did.
No, that's right. Okay, we're back on the record. Let's take a look at these dates. Do I have a hearing on June 12th? Do I have hearing this week or this week?
Let me check. Yeah, there's some hearings in there, that's why I couldn't pick.
I know we have one on the 10th because I have to be here for it.
Right, that's a mining case.
You have the Boca Grande continuance case on June 10th, and that is certainly not going to, they're going to withdraw. I mean, they might withdraw already because the board adopted their,
June 12th in the morning.
Okay.
the board's adopted the regulations. They're going to get their DO and their ADD, so they may not even come to that hearing. They might just withdraw the 10th in the
That
morning.
might be they'll just withdraw the case.
Yes.
Do you think that's, excuse me, I have jury duty on that day and I was going to try to talk them out of postponing it, trying to get them to postpone again. So if you think they're not going to be on the 10th, then
Well, it's on right now,
Yeah.
so.
Yeah, they
I
have to
better go
officially.
try to talk them out
But
of
what
it.
you're saying is June 10th could possibly be available because of that?
Yes.
Oh.
Call Jeff Henderson right
So
now. It's
maybe-
on the withdrawal.
We could set the start time for 10, and that would be sufficient. That would bring the 10th back into play.
I'm available on the 13th.
Okay.
the applicant would request Friday, June 13th.
All right. We will continue this case to Friday, June 13th at 9 a.m. Please bring a codified list of conditions and deviations without strike-through and underline unless there's a disagreement between you on a condition or a deviation, in which case, please provide 2 separately worded conditions or deviations for my consideration and label them either as staff or applicant version.
Will do.
Okay, thank you everyone for coming.
Thank you.
Madam Hearing Examiner, will public input be welcomed on the